The Nintendo Switch and now the Nintendo Switch 2 have really been the definitive Nintendo consoles for playing retro games. With Nintendo Switch Online, you get the NES, SNES, Game Boy Color, Nintendo 64, you even get the Sega Genesis. And with the Switch 2, obviously there's GameCube games now, so now there's only a few consoles that just have no games on the Switch, at least through Nintendo Switch Online, not talking about any ports or anything. And those would be the DS, 3DS, Wii, and Wii U. And I think this would be the perfect time to bring back some of these games, or at least in early 2026, because right now, especially early on in the year, I'm sure they'll have big games coming up, but they really don't have much on the horizon, and this could be a good way to hold fans over. And I was really thinking about this recently, and it hasn't really set in how crazy it is we're actually getting a Virtual Boy for the Switch. Like, not just Virtual Boy or Virtual Console, but they're actually making a replica headset. So we have that, but we don't have DS, 3DS, Wii, or Wii U, which is just kind of crazy to me. So I think Nintendo has to be working on something here. I know all those consoles are gimmicky, so it would take some workarounds to get it to work. So I'm going to talk about the DS, 3DS, Wii, and Wii U, and not only how I think it'll work, but how I think it's just extremely likely that it's going to happen soon. Because there's one big thing, doesn't confirm it, but makes it just incredibly likely for me, and I'll get to that later on. But starting with the DS, I mean, this one's easy. On the Wii U, there were DS Virtual Console games, and Nintendo actually gave people a few ways to play this. So one would be where the top screen is just the focus, where the bottom screen is maybe just a map or something. You just hold the gamepad normally, and then you have the left side of the screen with what you're going to be looking at most of the time, and then the right, which is the touch screen. And then there were other ones where you turn the gamepad vertically. There was having a virtual DS, and it's just good to have customization options, since obviously different DS games work differently, so some games may be better played in a different mode. Now, there are a few things on the DS that just wouldn't work on the Switch. Like, as far as I know, there's no blowing into microphone feature on the Switch. I'm pretty sure the Switch itself has a built-in microphone, or at least the Switch 2, I mean, unless it's the controller, but I'm pretty sure it's the system. But remember on the DS, there was games where you just blow into the mic and it would do something in the game. I don't know if the Switch 2 or the Switch could do something like that. I think there's probably easy enough workarounds, like maybe they just have something like you just say something into the mic, maybe they just add it as a button, but that's just a minor feature in the game, so I think Nintendo could work around it. And then for how it would work, obviously you could use the Switch like the gamepad if they did that, where you could just customize how it is, but obviously the Switch 2 screen is bigger than the gamepad, so it would look nicer. But something else that I think they could do and I think would be interesting, and we know Nintendo loves money and selling accessories, so I can't imagine why they wouldn't do this, is make an accessory where if you have, let's say, your Switch 2, and then you could attach your Switch on top, so it's like a giant DS. I think making something that allows you to play the Switch vertically, because yeah, I guess you could just put the Switch standing up and then just lean it against something, or even use the kickstand. I guess that you might be able to find a way to get that to work. But simply just adding an accessory that lets you just click on the Joy-Cons on the side so you hold the Switch like vertically, I think that's probably the best thing they could do here. Now, it might look kind of goofy, but I think if they just find a way to make the controllers comfortable, it could definitely work. And then moving on to the 3DS, this would be almost exactly the same. But there is another thing with the 3DS I do want to talk about, and it's the eShop games. So we lost a lot of games on the eShop that are just not playable now. The Pushmo series, BoxBoy, there's just so many others. Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, of course. And it would be a great chance to just bring these games back and make them playable again. Something I just hate is that when digital-only games just basically become unplayable, like there's no cartridges of them, there's just no other way to play it. I think that's really sad because people worked really hard in these games and a lot of people love these games. So that's personally something I'd be looking forward to the most, because I do have a 3DS, so any game that's not unreasonably priced that has a cartridge, if I really want to play it, I can get it. But a lot of digital games, I'm not going to buy a 3DS just because it has a game downloaded, because that's hundreds of dollars at this point. But something else for the 3DS would be 3D games. Now, I know most of us probably never actually played 3D, at least seriously. Like, you probably put on for like a minute and then just turn it off. I think if they really wanted to, they could find a way to make it work. The Switch screen isn't 3D. Maybe they have some type of special 3D glasses for this. I have no idea how that tech works. I'm sure if they really wanted to, they'd be able to do that, but I don't think we're really missing out too much if 3DS games come to the Switch or Switch 2 and you just can't play them in 3D. Like, by the end of the generation, the new 2DS came out, so they clearly just were not focusing on that, so I don't think that would be an issue. Now, the Wii, on paper, it sounds easy because there's motion controls, like, it should be that simple. I think it might take more work to actually get it to work on the Switch, because Yes, they're both motion controls, but they're different kinds. Like on the Wii, you would point it at the sensor bar. You don't do that on the Switch. So I'm sure they'd have to make adjustments, but I'm sure it would work. I don't know how long it would take. I don't know if Nintendo would see it as worth it, but I'd have to imagine it's something that Nintendo is considering doing, especially with GameCube. So now the Wii is one of only 2 home consoles by Nintendo that's just not on Virtual Console or Nintendo Switch Online. And remember, it actually was on Virtual Console on the Wii U. And now moving on to the Wii U, this one I think is definitely the toughest. I also think that this is probably the least realistic, even though I think there's a decent possibility it happens. So I shouldn't say it's not realistic, but the least likely, I should say. Because Nintendo has pretty much released all the big Wii U games on Switch through remasters or ports. Like, really the only big games I can think of from Nintendo that are not on the Switch that were on the Wii U would be like Smash, which I don't know why they would port that because there's Ultimate, so there's not really many people playing that nowadays. Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, like those kind of games are obviously never gonna come back as a port, so if people really wanted to play them, I guess having it as a Nintendo Switch Online game could be good. The big ones, I guess, would be the Zelda remake or the Zelda remasters, like Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD. Like, there's no way to play those unless you have a Wii U. So unless Nintendo wants to just make another port of those, just having them through Nintendo Switch Online would be great. Also, I know people might comment about something like Paper Mario Color Splash. That's another game, which not my favorite game, but there are people who like it, so I'm sure they'd appreciate getting a chance to play it on the Switch. But anyway, how would this work? So the first option I can think of is making a way to just use another Switch as a gamepad. Like, I have a Switch and Switch 2, so maybe I run it on the Switch 2, so my Switch 2 is in the dock, and I connect my Switch and use that as a gamepad and controller. I think that's a fairly realistic option. That's probably the best way it would work. Like, there's no buttons that would be lost or anything. Like, you'd be able to pretty much do anything you could on the gamepad. And for a lot of people, this would work perfectly. Like, most people who have the Switch do have the Switch, but there are, of course, going to be people who don't have a Switch with the Switch 2. Maybe they sold it, maybe they just didn't have one in the first place. And I know Nintendo loves money. I don't think they're going to require a whole second system for this. If they did it, maybe they would. I think a more realistic thing would be probably like $150 just gamepad replica, like something like the Virtual Boy, but obviously for the Wii U. I know a lot of people hate on the Wii U gamepad, but it was actually pretty ergonomical. Like, I never had any problems with it. And honestly, like, I wouldn't hate that. All right, so I talked about games that could come back. I talked about how it would work. But like I said in the beginning of the video, why do I think this is so likely? And here's why. So the GameCube was announced, or the GameCube Virtual Console was announced with Switch 2 Online, like in the trailer for the Switch 2, like in the presentation. So then a few months go by, and then last month in the September Direct, we got an announcement of the Virtual Boy Virtual Console, which I promise you there's not a single person that was expecting that. Like, if you were saying you were expecting a Virtual Boy Virtual Console and it wasn't because of leaks, you're just lying. So if Nintendo is willing to go that direction, you can't tell me that they're not at least considering making DS, 3DS, Wii, and Wii U Virtual Console. I mean, at least yes at this point. My guess to why it hasn't happened already is just because they don't want to just overwhelm people. Like, they marketed the GameCube Virtual Console, that was a big selling point, and to this point there's only been a handful of games, so they really haven't taken full advantage of that yet. And then Virtual Boy coming out next year, so they're not going to announce it just yet. They're going to want to hype up the Virtual Boy and the $100 Virtual Boy headset. But I think in early 2026, like, let's say there's another Direct, maybe after the Virtual Boy comes out, or after the GameCube gets more games, I could definitely see them maybe in the summer of next year finally releasing a DS Virtual Console. If they paired it with 3DS, that would be great too. So I feel like that's something they could do during the first couple years of this generation to really make like the Switch 2 the ultimate Nintendo console. Like, these are easy ways for Nintendo to just get people on Switch Online, maybe get people to the Pro version, because I know they have a few levels of membership, especially for people around my age, like who grew up playing on the DS, the 3DS, the Wii, even the Wii U. Like, this is something that could make a difference between just wanting to get the base version of Switch Online or even getting it all to getting the Pro version, because there's so many games I'd love to play on Switch. Like, I still have a lot of my DS and 3DS games and my Wii and Wii U games, but it's just not convenient for me to play. Like, I have the cords here somewhere, but if I want to play that, I have to just get it set up. For the Wii, I have to use a converter. For my DS or 3DS, I mean, those are just easy enough to play, but I'm not going to be bringing those around anywhere. Like, my Switch 2, sometimes, like, if I go somewhere and I know I'm going to be bored, I'll bring my Switch 2. I'm not going to bring that and a DS or 3DS, so having it all on one system would be great, and that would be something that would possibly sell it to me, because I don't think I have the most expensive version of Switch Online. And then I just want to talk about this also, like maybe adding more non-Nintendo consoles. Like, I know there's the Genesis, I think there might be another one, maybe get some Atari in there. At this point, Xbox would probably license it to Nintendo since they just don't care about exclusives. I highly doubt that would happen though, but with what Microsoft has been doing wouldn't surprise me too much. And this is also more opportunities for Nintendo to sell more controllers. Like they have the NES, SNES, N64, GameCube now Virtual Boy controllers. I think they have the Sega one also. So having more virtual consoles or more Nintendo Switch Online consoles that they can sell controllers for, like it's more money for Nintendo when it probably doesn't cost too much to have these games reworked for Switch Online. You can imagine having like a Wii remote for the Switch, imagine having the gamepad like I mentioned, imagine having the accessories so you could play the Switch vertically like the DS games. I think this is just all very likely to happen in this generation, but Nintendo has made bad decisions before, like they didn't have GameCube Virtual Console until Switch 2 when there was just zero reason to not have it on the original Switch. Like, I don't understand that decision, but at least they finally made it right. So is this a guarantee? No, but I do think it's very likely just because, I mean, come on, the Virtual Boy's back. Like, you're going to tell me they're bringing that back, but not the other consoles. I don't know, that would be something very Nintendo to do, so I shouldn't even say that. But let me know in the comments what games you want to see, if you think this is realistic. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other content. I have over 1,000 videos on so many other Nintendo topics. Also consider becoming a channel member for just a couple bucks a month. This has been Domain with Game Domain. Thank you for watching.